Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek. Episode 86. Voyager, Season 4, Episode 14. Message in a bottle.
What?
Your hollow matrix is unstable. It may explain your erratic behavior.
I told you I'm a work in progress. I was only installed 6 weeks ago.
Stable or not, I need you. And so does he.
He'll live. I say we leave him and deactivate ourselves.
No! You're free to do as you please. Go cower inside the data processor if you'd like. I'll work alone.
We're medical holograms. What can we expect to do against a ship full of Romulans?
I'm not sure. Not yet. But I've faced my share of challenges. Alien invasions, macroviral infestations. I've crossed Borg space, traveled through time.
Have you run a self-diagnostic lately? The EMH Mark I is designed to function in sickbay only.
Voyager lost its chief medical officer 4 years ago. I've been active ever since.
4 years? No wonder you're delusional. Your program's degrading after being active for so long.
I assure you, I am in perfect health. I was saving Voyager from annihilation when you were only a gleam in your programmer's eye. Now, are you going to help me take back this ship or not?
Get me the thrombic modulator.
Okay, so we're starting the podcast now. It's very important that we get right into this and move on through.
It's got a podcast.
Move on through the podcast.
No, you want to move into it, then out of it, then back into it.
We're in efficiency land. We're
moving through it.
We're in efficiency land. We're leaving dilly dally land and getting straight into efficiency land.
It can hurt.
Because that's what people want to get straight to the content.
Thrombic modulator.
Exactly. They want to hear about thrombic modulators and Andy Dick. So first step is to explain that this is the It's Got Star Trek podcast. Second step is to explain it's the 86th episode of this particular podcast. And then step number 3 is to state without any sort of equivocation that we are discussing in this episode Star Trek Voyager Season 4, Episode 14, Message in a Bottle. That's the episode we are discussing.
Do you think they named Picard after Robert Picardo?
No, I don't.
Because with all this, with all
Is that what you think?
With all the time stuff that happens in Star Trek, maybe they went back in time.
Well, Robert Picardo
renamed Picard.
He was around as a working actor prior to.
So you're just saying that they hired Robert Picardo because it sounded like Picard. You're not saying.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all.
You're not saying that Picard was named after Robert Picardo. You're saying Robert Picardo was hired because he had the same name.
I'd like to make it very clear to the audience that, and the audience will back me up on this. I didn't say shit. You just started talking, and somehow I got wrapped up into this whole business. I mean, this is how wars get started.
Yeah, well,
miscommunications.
You started it.
All right. Message in a bottle. What say thee? What say thee about Message in a Bottle?
It's fun. It was fun episode. It's fun. It was fun.
It is. I agree.
It was a fun one to watch.
Torres was rude again. Except this time she was criticizing 7 of 9 about being rude. But she was, remember it was in
a little racist.
She was pretty gruff.
In blink of an eye, she was being a dick to the doctor. In blink of an eye, right? Wasn't she? Because she was like saying, what was she saying in blink of an eye? That was the one where the doctor wanted to take pictures of something.
Yeah, the hollow pictures.
The hollow pictures.
Yeah, she was impugning his ability to take good photographs.
Oh yeah, and then she goes like, if you're not working on anything, you should just deactivate yourself to save us the energy.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And then in this episode, she's like to 7, she's like, we're not a bunch of drones like you're used to, which is like very reductive.
It's also you could argue it's racist.
Yes, it is.
Totally.
It's racist against Borg, which is a complicated topic. I recognize that.
Well,
I don't know.
It is. It's
prejudice at the very least.
It is, because it's telling 7 by calling her. She's just like, we're not just a bunch of drones. She's saying you're a mindless piece of shit, 7. And that was a big part of her life, and she basically of 7's life. And Torres basically invalidated her existence during that time, when 7 probably has strong memories of it, So it's just saying she was less valid as a Borg, which the Borg. I mean, they thought enough of the Borg. Picard did to not genocide them when he had the chance. Remember in that episode where they were going to send in one of those viruses that say left is right and right is left, and the computer's
Independence Day.
Yeah, and the computer's like, can't compute.
A paradox cube of some sort.
some sort of that. So yeah, so she was once again, and it was ironic because she was the one who's being
This
rude.
better be ironic.
And well, first of all, okay, I'll tell you. When she was telling Seven, this is ironic, right? What I'm about to tell you.
Okay, I'm just saying.
She was telling
People take this shit very seriously.
I know. It's been a hot topic for the past 30 years now, 20 years, or ever since that Alanis Morissette song. When she was saying, you don't even say please and thank you, like that's fucking rude to assume that someone else should say please and thank you, because there's plenty of cultures that think it's fake and superficial to say please and thank you. They think it's like, oh, you're being fake to my face. And I've heard, people complain about what they don't like in America. One of the things that kind of annoys them a little bit in America is everyone's always saying please and thank you, just being fake to their face, basically.
Write in at feedback@itsgotstartrek.com if you find it obnoxious when Americans say thank you too often.
Yeah, there you go. And so,
We have a large international listenership.
so that would be ironic, right? Her calling Seven rude for not saying please and thank you, where it's actually rude that Torres is assuming that Seven should say that.
Write us in at feedback@itsgotstartrek.com if you think that this particular scenario, as described by Dan, is ironic.
So, she was a dick to the Doctor, now she's a dick. She's got a bad attitude, but we've always known that about B'Elanna. But we find out later it's because she's suffering from crippling depression.
Yes. Yeah, you've got it. So this episode does not focus much on B'Elanna, but you do make some valid points. I think often B'Elanna got short shrift because she played the antagonistic character a lot. And I think it can give a wrong impression of her because, of course, if you watch every episode in and out, you might get a slightly different perspective. But it is often the case, and in a lot of these quote-unquote classic episodes that people really go back to, that her role is to sort of be obnoxious and as you said, rude. On the other hand, she's trying to, in her own sort of Klingon-influenced way, maybe is trying to help Seven, right? I mean, I don't know. I think there's not enough on screen.
She does. I mean, she does relent a little at the end of the episode and was like,
she likes when Seven zaps the Hirogen.
Yeah,
fella.
it would have been hilarious if that Hirogen actually died because before he went down, he was just like,
it was actually pretty fucked up.
Yeah, I kind of wish he actually died just because it would have made it more comical.
Which, by the way, I think it's the first time we actually see a Hirogen in Voyager.
And in the next episode, it's about Hirogen.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and the fella who plays this particular Hirogen was played by I think his name is Tiny Ron, and we see him most frequently as Grand Nagus Zek's assistant fellow. He's got that guy who carries around, because Grand Nagus Zek is basically just like Loxana Troi. He has to have a giant manservant who doesn't really say anything, who carries luggage around.
Mr. Hom.
Yeah, very similar Mr. Hom vibes, but it's the same actor, Tiny Ron, who plays this particular Hirogen. And one thing I like about this episode is on the face of it is a comedy episode, but the actual sci-fi plot that's going on is both kind of cool and hugely important to the arc of Voyager, right? This is the first time that they find a way to contact the Alpha Quadrant, and this episode, or the events of this episode, are referenced a lot in upcoming, for the rest of the series, basically, because this starts the end arc, basically, of the series.
Yeah.
Hirogen and contacting the Alpha Quadrant.
Well, and it makes sense. It would be kind of frustrating. I mean, shows have done it in the past, but it'd be kind of frustrating if they were like, wow, this is the first contact they've made back home, especially after home gave up on you, and now home specifically says, we're going to find your ass. It would be really kind of disappointing if they didn't follow up on that in some way. I mean, at the end of the episode, Janeway she looked like she was about to break down, cry. That was pretty cool. That was a touching moment.
That was pretty close too. Apparently, the final scene was actually refilmed because they had originally filmed it with a whole bunch of people in, I think it was probably in the mess hall or something, with all the crew, and it was more celebratory. And I guess after they filmed it, they thought, this is not quite the right vibe. So they went back and made it. I guess it was just Janeway, Chakotay, and the Doctor. Make it a little bit more intimate, which I think, I haven't seen the alternate version, but I definitely felt emotionally impacted by this moment of realization that when the Doctor is kind of explaining really quickly all the things he told Starfleet headquarters, Speaking
of which, do you think that Janeway and Torres, the reason they hate each other is because they both had sex with Chakotay?
Do they hate each other?
Yeah, I think it's well known that they hate each other.
Is it well known that they hate each other?
Yeah.
Well, it just seems like
Have they both had sex with Chakotay at this point, or are you supposing?
They've both had. Well, I mean, Torres had sex with them a long time ago, I think.
Maybe.
Like
I can't
before
recall.
before the show.
Before the show.
In the Maquis times?
Yeah, in the Maquis times. Because you don't know when if you don't. It's very
she
central.
just doesn't
time.
seem to like too many people really. Like
No, but
she's just-
but that's not the point. See, especially being on the Maquis as like what the Federation considers a terrorist. Every day could be your last, and so that's like sort of really motivates you to want to have sex with everyone around you. So
I can
it just
see
makes
that,
sense that they're both attractive people, in positions of power, both of them, and they're just it's just like the Olympics. They fuck all the time at the Olympics.
I wanna read a book with you because you're really good at reading between the lines. You make each page.
you guys
last
should do
like,
a book. You guys do a book.
We do a book podcast.
A book club, yes. A book
It's
club
got
podcast.
a book.
For some reason I couldn't say it. Book.
Yeah, it's hard to stay on. It's hard to stay on topic if you keep branching off into other directions, I guess. So, but
Well, all
That's
right.
how it goes.
why didn't the Doctor just stay on the Prometheus? I mean, I know he was being honorable by going back.
Well, he had to convey the message back to them as well.
He could have done. He could have done that over through the. He could have sent a holographic because for some reason we found. Oh yeah, another point that we have to think about from here on out. Just like how the Voyager made contact with home, and like that's something like they have to remember that lore for the future. They need to remember the lore now that holographic messages somehow degrade less quickly.
Oh yeah.
Than
Yeah, that was neat.
normal messages.
all Star Trek from here on out has to adhere to that concept.
Yeah, or else they'll have to continuously admit that it was a mistake.
Well, with regard to the Doctor not
anyways,
coming back,
yeah.
you are assuming a motivation on his part that he has some motivation to get back to the Alpha Quadrant, which there is no particular reason to expect that he has such a motivation, given that his essentially entire existence has been on Voyager, particularly the formative parts of his existence that's his family. Voyager and the crew of Voyager are his family. So him being in the Alpha Quadrant just gives him bragging rights over the others.
Yeah, I mean,
nanny boo boo. I'm in the Alpha Quadrant. Where are you?
That makes sense, but they give him a bedside manner. I mean, I was thinking about that, like how they must give these doctors this intense big personality so they can, because that's part of being a doctor is have a good bedside manner, right? So that requires some kind of personality, and which makes it all the more hilarious that the doctor's all persnickety, and also Andy Dick Doctor was also so that's kind of
both of
funny.
them-
The bedside manner they do give them is really obnoxious.
Both of them designed by Dr. Zimmerman, who looks just like the Doctor, and so his personality is very similar to that. And it's important to note before we get to the Andy Dick part of the topic is this takes place, I believe, after Our Man Bashir, or no, not Our Man Bashir, Dear Dr. Bashir, I presume. Sorry, there's so many awesome Bashir episodes. Dr. Bashir, I presume, is when Dr. Zimmerman comes to Deep Space Nine because he wants to model the new EMH, although he's calling it an LMH, a long-term medical hologram. He wants to model it off of Julian Bashir because of how awesome Dr. Bashir is, right? And how cute. And how it's like, can I look what a cute package Dr. Bashir comes in. And there's a whole plot and an interesting stuff that goes on as a result. And by the end of the episode, he decides not to do that. So now we're seeing that whatever he did decide to do involved modeling it after Andy Dick.
Yeah. Well, and so what I was getting at was if he's going to design it after himself or a person in general, you would expect the motivations would be similar, such as let's get home, even if you don't. But I mean, it's a good
what's
point.
home? What's home, right?
Well, home is Earth.
Home is not Earth.
I mean, no, home.
Earth for Earthers.
No. I mean, in his brain, he's programmed to think that Earth is home.
No, but that's an assumption. Why would he assume that?
Because
he lives on a ship.
Because the rest
wouldn't it make sense to program the thing to want to be with the ship?
the rest of his personality is programmed like someone else.
I agree. However,
and including being a persnickety, anal, kind of doctor,
but I would
why didn't they change that?
I agree. I think the issue was with him. He's somewhat experimental on Voyager because Voyager is this experimental ship when it launches. It has biogel, special conduits, and stuff like that. the doctor was not really a good final version because he doesn't have the good bedside manner. But not only that, I'm thinking in practical terms. You have an AI. You're not thinking of it as sentient at this stage. You're not thinking of it as a being worthy paying attention to. It's just a utility, a programmed utility. And in that event, presumably you might. I'm not going to make the assumption, but it would be logical to program that thing to want to be with the ship.
You must have read my mind because I was actually about to say you're making a lot of assumptions right now.
I assiduously avoided doing such.
You are, but you're just saying you're not.
No, I'm not making the assumptions. There are assumptions that you are on the menu, and you can select them off the menu, and you can utilize them as you put together your model of the Star Trek universe. And that's fine, just so long as you recognize that there are assumptions, and that you might have to switch out that assumption for another
I know
one.
about not presuming that my world is everyone's world. I'm just saying. I was just going
Home is
along.
Earth. Home is Earth. God damn it!
I was going with what we've been fed thus far. See, I'm going strictly based upon what the show is feeding us.
Sure, that's a fair point. And for as progressive as Star Trek can be, it often is very Earth-centric and human-centric.
Well,
in fact, there's even that in this episode. There's this whole the doctor's all like, whether he's Romulan or human, I would help him. It's like, yeah, dude, you got lots of non-humans on your ship.
If it was a Vulcan EMH, I would have said he would have wanted to go home to Vulcan. It doesn't matter. The point is where they're modeled from.
All right, no worries. We'll. It's not even an agree to disagree thing. We're both on the same page here. We're just studying and delving into the nuances.
What say you, Jesse?
Yeah, what say you? Goddammit.
About where he wants to get back to Earth. I think his home is just on Voyager. Like, really, if you think about it.
You motherfucker.
Yes.
But
You're off the Christmas card
He might
list.
have some kind of programming that makes him, want to go to Earth. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't think they're going to get that detail.
It was programmed after Dr. Zimmerman. Dr. Zimmerman didn't even necessarily like Earth that much. He didn't seem to like people. So
yeah, and you can't necessarily assume that any old human's going to even ever have been to Earth. Maybe they grew up on some other planet, and they,
That's right.
Why, you don't have to go to Earth. There's lots of other planets
tons of other planets
that aren't full of fucking humans.
Yeah, you can go to Risa. You can go get a job on Risa, work in the weather control.
Jamaharans.
Yeah. You can just, every night after you finish your shift at the weather control station, you get your Horgon out, get it out of the cabinet, you put your folding chair out front of your little condo, in your rainforest condo, you flop it out, slam that Horgon down on the end table next to you, grab a book, put on your Speedos, and just wait. That's my understanding of how it works on Risa.
That seems to be how it works on the show. Yeah.
A Horgon. I keep thinking of I keep breaking that word into its parts and trying to come with a connection for why it's called a Horgon.
Yeah,
it's an alien word.
It was the 1980s.
Yeah. I don't feel like getting into it.
It's complicated.
So yeah, Torres treats the doctor like Pulaski treated Data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, she does. Even in as you noted, like later on, up to the 6th season, she was already still a little dismissive of him. Not that she didn't respect him, but she didn't think about it. She treated him as if he was still a regular old utility program.
Yep. So they find this big giant internet that goes across space, right? I mean, I guess the internet's just a big giant network. It's just a network. Starts off as network, then we elevated a normal network to an internet, and now it's back to a network again because it's so huge.
So yes, they found this
It goes through
array,
space.
and which we later discover is owned and operated by the Hirogen. But initially, Seven finds this thing, starts experimenting on her own volition or initiative, and discovers that she can access it and sees the Prometheus, what we will later come to realize is
And
the
in
Prometheus.
seeing the Prometheus, she seizes the day.
Yeah, and then also annoys B'Elanna because B'Elanna is frustrated, and I think justifiably. I think
like taking someone's tools and like locking them away, that's fucked up.
her reaction is both justifiable, but as I agreed with Chakotay, he said you're a senior officer, act like it. Now, on the other hand, this is an example of where if they wanted to, they could have played up more the whole Maquis versus regular Starfleet, and that's unfortunately one of the issues, minor or major, that's up to you, but one of the issues with Voyager is they pretty much abandoned the whole Maquis versus Starfleet thing with very few exceptions, like after the pilot episode. But if they hadn't, this is where you could see that the core of that conversation would have been about, yeah, you could get away with that kind of behavior in the Maquis, but we're no longer in the Maquis. We're in Starfleet now, so you've got to figure out like a Starfleet way to fix this problem.
She figures it out. She becomes passive aggressive. She starts recalibrating the controls. Like, she recalibrated those controls because she wanted to start some shit with Seven. Seven's like, you recalibrated the controls. You shouldn't have done that. And she's like, that's your opinion. In my opinion. In your opinion. Please and thank you. Like, she didn't just do that because she thought she needed to. She did it specifically to open up the conversation with Seven, so she could tell Seven that she's being mean.
I think you're absolutely right about that. Seven is in this episode, and it's
what Seven did was fucked up. You don't take someone's tools like that.
The thing is, it's in this episode. It's in a few other early episodes with Seven as well, where she sort of plays the role of the person who's being obnoxious, but at the same time is highly competent. And not just highly competent, but has certain levels of competence beyond anyone else available on this particular ship, right? So that's always an interesting scenario. And they tease it a little here. They don't go too much into it, but that whole deal, and many people may have dealt with this at work or school or something like that, where you have the person who is kind of aggravating, but the problem is they are also producing. And that creates somewhat of a conflict because fairly or unfairly, and I'd say unfairly, it can be easier to dismiss somebody if they're of regular competence or if they have some level of incompetence. But in this case, B'Elanna has to deal with the fact that the things that 7 of 9 is currently doing are amazing. She's found a connection to the Alpha Quadrant, and that's hugely important to this ship in particular, right? So that they didn't go too much into that, but there's flavors of that here in the interactions they have in this episode. I expected that would sort of result in somebody being all like, well, but I guess that's, we can conclude the B'Elanna and Seven conversation part of this particular.
Well, it's true. It's true in everyday life, pretty much. Is if you can get away with a whole lot more if you're good at your job,
and which is not necessarily fair, right?
It's not fair, but it's not fair. There should be a strict set of rules that everyone should adhere by, but it's also not that cut and dry either.
You got to learn those rules. And 7 of 9 is brand new to this whole human thing.
Well, it's because everybody makes mistakes at some point, right? And so you're always going to have to keep making exceptions to the rules you make, no matter what, because it's not realistic to maintain a reasonable base of employees if you fire them after breaking the rules one time. So what do you say? 3 strikes, you're out? Well, it really depends, And so when you get in the subjective gray area world, you can sort of convince yourself that some mistakes were more egregious than others. And if the person happens to be really good at their job, you can be like, well, they probably won't make that mistake too many times. Whereas someone else does it who's not that good at their job, you can be like, I'm just sick of dealing with this person. So it's like we don't act in like ones and zeros and ons and offs like that,
What do you think? What do you think about Chakotay's approach? Do you think it was appropriate for him to just ask B'Elanna to sort it out herself? And one argument is that he had faith in her to be able to find a resolution because that's what he expects of her, and that's what he has. He does have faith in her that she has the skills to do that. On the other hand, you could argue it's not necessarily that helpful for the first officer to be like, yeah, you figure it out. When she's coming to him, presenting a problem, she's saying like, here's a problem I have, and his suggestion to her is to be a senior officer. So
it's like, well, I don't need that problem. Why don't you deal with it?
Yeah, it just sounds like he kind of doesn't. Yeah, it sounds like he doesn't want to deal with it.
So I
don't need these crazy chicks being crazy all the time. Let them figure it out.
We can imagine a scenario, and I think we've seen some with Riker, for example, where Riker knows the solution. Somebody comes to him, they have a problem. You can tell Riker knows the solution in his mind, and he's choosing to let that officer figure it out on their own. Maybe he points them in the right direction, and then he's at the end of the episode, he's all like, I knew you'd get it. But here, Chakotay, it seems more like he's like, I don't know what to fucking do with this lady. She just showed up. I don't know what to do. You figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess when it depends on, like, if at a certain point it gets to be like interpersonal relationships that you kind of feel like you guys need to work this out, because if you don't work out this, anything I do is just going to be symptomatic. It's not going to get at the crux of the issue, and that's but no, it is true. That's why like they have whole departments at jobs. I mean, everyone always jokes about how HR is there to protect the company, and and to an extent that's true, obviously, but they are there too to like help some conflict resolution, and whether or not it's for this company prevent being sued, regardless, it's there to like help with interpersonal conflicts. And so you should listen to people.
I think of it like this, right?
But they are from the Maquis, so that's another thing. They have different rules they go by.
Part of what happens when I'm watching these things, watching these Star Trek episodes, and there's these leadership issues. You watch it, and then you try to think to yourself, well, what would you do in this scenario? Now, granted, it's a different context. We can't necessarily relate fully with being a spacefaring, military officer. But I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, if I'm Chakotay or Janeway, I just tell them, I sit them down and say, like, look, clearly there's some miscommunication. B'Elanna, 7 of 9, was kidnapped and brutally body modified and had her brain modified for years by the Borg, and she is still in recovery. We just met her this season, right? Just a few 14 episodes ago, right? So please have some understanding that she's got a ways to come along. And then I would, look at 7 and say, 7, logically, you must understand that there are certain nuances. You're going to take a while to learn them, but please make an attempt and understand. We're not trying to be assholes about it. It's just, this is sort of how things work. Please and thank you, because it's an Earth ship, and it's mostly humans, and it's all Americans.
Yeah, when you were saying that about Riker, it got me thinking about the episode where Troy was trying to become
yes,
was that
great example?
I can't remember what rank she was trying to
commander.
But now that wasn't interpersonal between two people, but it was with herself. It was an emotional issue Troy was having with herself, where she couldn't mentally get over something. And yeah, Riker is kind of like. He's letting her. He's letting her,
nudging her in the direction she needs to go without holding her hand doing it.
Right. But he's not dismissing her, but he's not holding her hand doing it. And he was right all along. And
but of course, in that scenario, she was trying to pass a test to be able to command the bridge.
Yeah.
Whereas in this case, B'Elanna is already a senior officer. Mm-hmm. And you could argue that maybe it'd be good for her to, but again, it gets all into the weeds, like you said, about the Maquis and all that other stuff. Mm-hmm. So, the doctor that B'Elanna was mean to is the central part of this episode.
Yeah, we haven't really gotten to.
Because he's the one who they have a very short amount of time to try to figure out what they're going to do with this connection they have. And they realize that they can send the doctor through because his message won't get all garbled up. Because as you noted, Dan, now and forever in the Star Trek lore,
holographic data streams
they stay together better. They stick together. There's holographic that just clumps together.
Sticking together is what good holographic data streams do.
Yeah. So he gets sent over to the Prometheus,
which has not only regenerative shielding,
but really tan design, off-white, weird. Their Voyager people were like, hey, you know what an even more advanced ship is going to look like? It's going to be all like off-white.
I was going to say multi-vector assault mode and ablative shielding, but
yeah,
it was kind of bright, and I kept being obsessed with how the pilot seats were in a recessed floor. The floor was all, and then it got,
which is something they've been trying to put into Star Trek ships in the designs for. If you look at the production designs, they wanted to do that forever. Even back in TNG, these really? Recessed things.
What made me happy is that they put arm railings around it too, so people wouldn't fall in. Because often, Star Wars, of course, is famous for not putting railings on things.
And Voyager's actually really good. Voyager's good with the railings, right from the beginning. The Voyager bridge is in a lot of ways a much more practical bridge than some of the other bridges.
But then what got me thinking about the Star Trek set in general, which is really just stadium seating, right? It's like, you got the pilots are always at the front.
Yeah, and they're made of that hard plastic, and it flips down, but you can't put your drink on it because then your drink will flip up.
What?
Stadium seating?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's just like that.
I apologize.
Yeah.
All right, please move along.
And then there's the raised people. In this case, relatively raised because they were actually at floor level, but because the front was recessed, we'll call this raised. It's like if you can't bring yourself up, you have to bring others around you down. That's the key to life.
And there weren't that many people on the bridge, but the bridge wasn't that busy. Like there wasn't a lot of stuff in it. It was just like, whatever the controls they needed were. They didn't need a whole lot of.
It was sparse.
So they weren't taking up a lot of space. You didn't need a whole lot of consoles.
It was a pretty small bridge too.
Well.
It's sort of like what you see more in like Picard or even like in the future Discovery stuff.
I guess the point I was getting at with the stadium seating was just that it was like in an actual bridge type scenario. Obviously, you make accountances for TV, which is why it's stupid to complain about. But it's just kind of funny. Like, why do those people in the back always need to be all raised up all high, and why do the pilots need to be all low?
They should have amphitheater seating, like it's just long benches.
Why aren't the pilots like in the back?
Yeah, why aren't the pilots in the back?
Yeah,
I played this game I played called
They don't have to be like right up by the view screen.
Mass Effect.
Never
heard of it.
I only talked about it a few times. Actually, no, I take it back. That one, the pilot was like at the front, but everyone else was like 100 meters back. But the point being is like they got screens back there. What makes the view screen for pilots any better than any other screen?
It's not a window. It's not the window.
Right.
It's just a screen.
It's just a screen.
Like you don't have to be up near the screen.
Yeah. So why aren't they?
Or
in
you
the
can
back?
have the screen in the back. Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and there's no reason that the people in the back should be all high up. I guess it doesn't matter. But yeah, that's tan, like Patrick said.
It's tan.
I was confused at first because when he was talking to that dead guy, doctor was talking to that dying guy, I was like, is that Paris? I thought it was like, are we in some kind of like multi-dimensional episode? I was like, no,
looked a little bit
I was like, no,
like,
that's not Paris.
I was like, do you have face blindness or something?
His face was covered in blood, so
and burns. Yeah,
so it kind of looked like. I thought the first one was almost thought that was Torres, but then I was like, immediately I was like, that's not Torres. But the second one, I was like, that might be Paris, and it wasn't.
You're really into this Torres person.
So the doctor.
So, when you were talking about the tan bridges, that got me thinking also of how.
Of Bow bridges.
Of how
Nash bridges.
Lloyd bridges.
No, Lloyd bridges. That's a good bridge.
How Klingon ships are super dark and murky and like smoky inside, with mist and stuff.
Green and red.
Yeah, and amazing. And
rust.
And Cardassian ships are apparently all industrial and weird looking and
curvy industrial.
And then these Federation ships are all bright. And yeah, that tan was. It reminded me of like a school or something.
It was strange. It was a strange design. And I'm sure they wanted to differentiate, right? So Voyager went with a darker color scheme, more in line with the First Contact and other sort of things. So they moved away from the Star Trek V TNG beiges. But this wasn't beige. This was because the other shows in TNG, there was beiges, but with accents of black and red and burgundy and things like that, gray. This was just everything was some form of weird tan. I guess you could call it a beige, but it was a weird beige. Not that it's a big deal. It stood out to me.
You were saying about they don't need that many people to run the ship. By the end, it was just the two holograms running that ship.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't so much that, but you could just tell that there wasn't a lot of stuff on the bridge. I mean, it was a big bridge-shaped
Discovery
room,
is like the Discovery, from the show Discovery. That's a huge fucking bridge.
Do you mean Star Trek Discovery?
I mean Star Trek Discovery. That's a huge bridge.
It is a huge bridge.
It's a big bridge.
They went all big bridge style.
That's back in the 2200s and shit.
Yeah. As you get closer to the front of the timeline, than the front of the timeline, as you get later, more technology, the bridge gets smaller and smaller until it's just like a chip in your brain. It's like, we're all on the bridge. We're on the virtual bridge.
It's the bridge in your mind.
Talking something about the doctor was telling EMH2 to like reroute power to the bridge or something, wasn't it?
Well, there was a bunch of that stuff going on, and a reminder, of course, I'm sure most of our audience recognizes this, including diehard fans of Voyager. Voyager went a little bit crazy with the technobabble. Right from the beginning of the episode with B'Elanna's conversation onward, with the thrombic this and the doctor and all.
They were summoned to astrometrics.
Yeah.
Astrometrics.
Yeah, there was a part where
you measure asteroids.
Yeah, totally, but like Star Trek made that word up, I think.
Near the end, the EMH2 goes like the secondary gyrodyne relays and the propulsion field intermatrix have depolarized. And the doctor says in English. It's like fucking like one of the most overused, like in English, man. I can't believe
Like, aren't you in Starfleet, man?
there was a couple
And
like
a computer.
yeah, there were a couple jokes about like was it the doctor said I'm a doctor, not a commando, and then Paris later said like I'm a this, not a
I'm a pilot, not a doctor.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a great line.
And so that was
decent,
was
yeah.
great. This wasn't a joke. He was like doing the in English, man, and it's like, well, everyone
It's
says
like,
that.
I'm
And
stupid. Explain it to me nicer.
yeah, and on top of that, talking about Earth centric. Why is that?
All right, give it to me. Bring it over.
Why does it have to be in English? I thought they were all on universal translators anyway. So why would you?
Exactamundo.
Why would you? Same reason, like when Neelix was talking about making jalapenos.
Yeah, that was funny that he said
Jolly-
it so
jolly-
strangely.
I even tested on my phone.
Jalopy nose.
On my phone?
It made me think of a jalopy, like a broken down car, and a nose.
I know.
I said
A jalopy on your nose.
I tested my Google Voice and I said jalapeno in my Google Voice thing, and it knew that I was saying jalapeno.
because
so,
Google knows that people are stupid.
yeah, so when Neelix says jalapenos, supposedly their Google Translate would know he's saying jalapenos, and he wouldn't pronounce it jalapeno. I mean, he wouldn't pronounce it jalapeno. You see what I'm saying? Because technically, it's the universal translator that's talking.
You're making
right?
me think that the doctor probably speaks in some sort of screeching binary code.
Yeah, he
Sort of
probably
a
does.
modem sound, but the universal translator just translates it.
Right. So in English is a very Earth-centric and American-centric thing to say because you're presuming everyone in the universe speaks fucking English.
I think
and,
that's how it's going to be.
and-
Huge proportion of people in English-speaking countries don't speak English.
And Neelix would have not said jalapenos because the universal translator would have kicked in and said, he's trying to say jalapenos. And it would have
I
done
think
that.
you might have discovered a fundamental flaw to Star Trek. we
damn
gotta be careful
He
when we
also said
release this episode.
he
We're
said
gonna cause a
rodeo
ruckus.
instead
Okay.
of rodeo.
Who did?
Rodeo. Well, you can say rodeo. isn't
Yeah,
it?
but that's
Who said rodeo?
rodeo.
Who said rodeo?
It's rodeo Red's Red Hot Rootin' Tootin' Chili.
Yeah,
He said-
rodeo.
yeah.
Red,
It's
red
because it's American cuisine.
Yeah, he said that's some sort of
Yeah.
classic American cuisine that I've never heard of.
Yeah, so, I mean,
I've heard of chili. I enjoy chili.
I haven't heard of Rootin' Tootin' Chili.
look, I understand that. I
I don't
understand.
want to eat that.
I
I don't
understand.
want to
too
do
many
any
beans in
sort
it.
of Rootin' Tootin'. I don't
Too
think
many
so.
beans.
I understand the universal translator is used to like get rid of some plot tedium, so you don't have to keep like accounting for it every time. It's like it's just the universal translator. It's not there for any other purpose than just for us to make this show more easily. But to use it as a point to leverage humor, I think is a little,
I agree. But we're looking back on the 1990s
it's all stupid.
with eyes from a new millennium where we are all hopefully a little bit more thoughtful about these things so we can catch them and call them out.
It's not a Jeffries tube, like as in a guy named Jeffrey. It's not his tube. It's a Jeffries tube, as in a tube that has a lot of Jeffries in it.
Although they were named after Matt Jeffries, who was a prop guy. He was a prop guy on the original Star Trek.
So it is a Jeffries.
Because
It
they
is
were
his
always
tube.
they were always crawling around in those things, so they called them Jeffries tubes
Always
because he
for-
made them.
I always forget the rule when you put an apostrophe. I mean, I understand, apostrophe means possessive, but like when it ends with an S, you're not always supposed to put the apostrophe at the end. Sometimes you
depends.
still add an extra S to it.
It depends. Yes,
It's a preposterous.
So I don't know.
depends on
if-
like the syllable
if
structure.
it was possessive, would the Jeffries tube be apostrophe at the end, or would it?
Well,
be,
his name was Matt Jeffries.
yeah. So would it be S
would-
apostrophe or would it be S apostrophe S?
it's not Jeffrey's tube. It's,
I think-
it's a Jeffrey's tube.
I think it would just be
right. Yeah,
apostrophe. I think in this case it would just be apostrophe. Write us in at feedback@itsgotstartrek.com about apostrophe gate. Subject line apostrophe gate.
It's not Jeffries tube. You're right, Jesse, but it does belong to Jeffries.
Yes, Matt Jeffries.
yeah, Jeffrey's.
But he doesn't own it.
but
It's just named
It's
after
not
him.
like
But it's his possessive.
Yeah, it's like Ruth's Chris.
right. It's not
Ruth's
like that.
Chris Steakhouse, a popular steakhouse in the United States of America.
It's a guy named Chris that Ruth owns.
I think the story behind that was that a woman named Ruth purchased Chris's steakhouse,
Chris Steakhouse.
but because she purchased it, kind of like Peggy Hill, when Peggy Hill got a hold of Sugarfoots in that King of the Hill two-parter.
Peggy Hill
Peggy
Sugarfoot.
Sugarfoot.
She named it Peggy Sugarfoots. I think it's the exact same scenario with Ruth's Chris. So Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Chris Steakhouse purchased by Ruth. Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. It's really it's like rural juror. It's a difficult restaurant name, but check it out. They've got good steaks.
She ruined Sugarfoot's.
this is what the scene was. Is they were talking about the EMH1, the doctor. We'll just call EMH1 the doctor. The doctor is. I'm saying it now. The doctor was talking about how they're
Dan with his declarative statements this evening. I like it. I like it. It shows oomph, verve, and confidence.
He's telling it like it is.
So he was saying Neurazine will do nicely. It can be distributed in gaseous form. Show me a schematic of the ship's ventilation system, please.
What do the blueprints say?
And then Dick Doctor says all primary systems have been rerouted to the bridge. I didn't understand what that meant originally, but now I do. It just means they took all the tubes and like
they took control of not. What are you talking about?
All the tubes that send the Neurazine out, and they send them. Like I don't understand what it's been rerouted to the bridge.
All he was saying was that
the tubes.
Control. No, they've shut down control of access to controlling any computer terminal. They've rerouted the controls to the bridge. That's all.
I bet you
standard Star Trek.
No,
thing.
but I bet you the bridge can control anything at any time it wants to.
It can.
Yeah, that's why
they're
doing it.
But you can lock out other controls, which would make sense, right? This happens all the time on Star Trek. You've seen this before.
Why would you want to lock out certain controls?
Because you're getting invaded, and you don't want the invaders to tap on the screens.
I guess you don't want some blue or green ensign fucking with some engineering shit.
Well, potentially that's true, but I mean specifically.
Yeah, you don't want some blue-green ensign up there.
Blue-green.
Like a Bolian mixed with a Orion.
An Orion. You don't want some dirty Orion up there.
I don't know. I'd be into that.
Yeah, maybe.
But the idea that you can shut off access remotely is perfectly normal, perfectly reasonable. We've seen it a million times.
I just didn't see the point, and I thought for a while they meant they were going to reroute all the tubing, so they took over the ship. All the Neurazine juice would go to the bridge only, but it goes everywhere.
I'm disappointed.
It was everywhere.
It was only 27 Romulans. That's all they had to.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot of Romulans to start. They already have a skeleton invasion crew.
How long have they been holding on to this ship?
It's, I think, very short time.
Yeah.
Because the guy. Remember, the guy in sickbay that the doctor encounters is dying. I mean, he's not dead yet. So this has just happened. I think he's arrived basically just after the Romulans have taken over.
So the Navala. She was complaining to the captain. And by the way, that Romulan captain was an asshole.
By the way, do you know where you've seen him before?
In other episodes of Star Trek?
In the Wrath of Khan.
He's in two prominent Star Trek roles. One is in the TNG episode Symbiosis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's in that one.
Where he plays one of the aliens. That's a really good episode. But more famously, he's Khan's right-hand man,
he's that
second
other guy.
in command, Joaquin.
Yeah.
In Wrath of Khan.
Okay.
He's got like crazy 80s sci-fi hair.
Yours is superior. That's an ironic line because he's saying that when Khan is getting his ass kicked by Kirk.
So that was good. That was a good bit of information.
Good anecdote. Good Star Trek anecdote.
Yeah.
Trivia. Connecting the universes together.
Yeah, because it's one unified
universe.
So I think that was her name, Navala. Yeah, Navala. She was talking about how because Ricard, the captain, wanted to put on the multi-vector attack mode, and she was like, "We haven't tested it."
I still can't get over the whole word multi-vector attack.
Yeah, it just means it splits into 3 parts,
and it describes it perfectly. So I can't
multi-vector assault mode.
Yeah, I can't have like I don't have a qualm with it. It just sounds so silly.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Activate multi-vector attack mode.
It is so silly.
It should be called like fuck 'em up mode.
Yeah, but it does fuck people up.
Well, real quick, do you think like she was saying they haven't tested it yet, meaning like she was just saying, because originally it sounded like she was saying we don't know if it works right, but really it's just they're not good at it yet, I guess is what they were saying.
Taking a page from your book, I'm going to read between a few lines here.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I think what we can deduce from the facts on the screen are that this is an experimental ship. It was an experimental ship designed to be fast and to go out on deep space exploration, and also apparently be able to kick some ass. And the ship was on its test run, doing its test stuff. Romulan intelligence, Tal Shiar got wind of it. And
they probably didn't have that many Starfleet people on the ship.
So
they said only 4 people in Starfleet knew how to pilot it.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think that that her statement is not just about them not having tested it. I think it may even been like, look, we got to them before they got a chance to do their shakedown cruise, because that's what you would do. You would intercept the ship before it's like out doing maneuvers, right?
So that okay, that makes total sense, actually.
Although the multi-vector thing did not help the original Starfleet crew stopping the Romulans from attacking them. So we didn't get to see all that.
They were talking about decoupling the ship, and like, I know it doesn't mean this, but when I think of decoupling, I think of one thing turning into two, not one thing turning into three.
It's like a train. You know, you decouple train cars.
Yeah, I just think of it should be called detripling if it turns into 3 parts.
I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos of people riding trains in Japan, sleeper trains in Japan. Highly recommended. I thought of that because you mentioned decoupling.
Does that really like put you to sleep?
No, you go to sleep on your own dime. You do have to pay $3 to use the shower for 6 minutes, though.
6 minutes. I've heard that a lot of things in Japan are expensive like that.
I mean, I don't know. Is that expensive? Because the water stops. If you stop the water, the time stops. So you can take a longer shower, but you get 6 minutes of water.
You just got to keep putting your yen in there.
So if you want to do that whole thing where you just kind of like
popping yen,
rub the soap all over, you just turn the water off and get that soap all over, and then you rinse off.
Can't do that.
Anyway.
So, multi-vector attack mode, that's essentially like what the Enterprise D did, where you could detach the saucer.
Sort of, although...
this one, you can detach the top part of the saucer, the very bottom part, and the middle sort of connector piece.
And I think the key difference here...
This is like Enterprise D's nuts.
the Enterprise the Enterprise D saucer separation...
wasn't a...
It seemed more... Because one... I mean, we don't know in this case, but I don't think we know. I don't know if it's clear to us whether all the units have warp capability or not.
And it didn't seem like they were synchronized to fight in like battle formations. It seemed like it was just to like they only used it once or twice, and that was to get other people away while the thing went
exactly.
off to
In the
shit.
Enterprise D, it seemed to be more of a defensive thing, especially because they had so many civilians on. But I do think it's important that we note that this Prometheus sort of predicts or is the first example of what we see taken to full fruition in Discovery Season 3 when they're in the 31st century and all their ships seem to be able to just like come to pieces and do all sorts of crazy shit.
Detachable nacelles.
Detachable
for some
nacelles.
reason.
Yep.
Somehow it works better. What makes you more agile. I don't understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the doctor...
It's just like you might as well just take 3 other ships instead of one ship.
Yeah, it's like why don't you just have 3 ships there that are awesome?
Which helps at the end of this episode when they actually just have more. They have 3 Starfleet ships show up, a couple of Defiant class or whatever. I forget what the class the Defiant is. It might be a Defiant class.
Those totally look like Defiants.
But they
were kicking ass.
The doctor, so he gets over there, he sees the dead guy, gets some information, and rapidly figures out that something's going on here. You know, this whole deal with the Romulans. And so he gets the EMH2 online, and that's where we first get to see Andy Dick in Star Trek as a character, and who
he's a character,
and I know it's subjective. I think he did a really great job with this character.
It was weird hearing him talk about like how they have all the best drugs. And he's like, doctor's like, what do you got? And he's like, only the best: Axonol, Neurazine, and Estazine. It's like, oh man, Andy Dick can't escape this.
Well, that's what's so
his reputation.
What's fascinating about this is Andy Dick is such an interesting character because he has done fucked up shit, and not just in terms of substance abuse or whatever. I mean, that's a separate issue. Lots of people deal with substance abuse issues, but he's been kind of an asshole to people. Most people will be familiar with the story where he got the shit kicked out of him by
to John Lovitz.
Yeah,
right?
John Lovitz. Because John Lovitz was very close friends with Phil Hartman, and Phil Hartman was murdered by his own wife, who was on some sort of weird cocaine bender. And long after that event, Andy Dick saw John Lovitz in a bar or something, and they were gotten to some altercation, and Andy Dick was like, I'm the one who sold the cocaine to Phil Hartman's wife, and then so John Lovitz just started wailing on him, and that's not the only incident. I mean, you look up Andy Dick, and there are tons of incidents where he says kind of fucked up shit, or he behaves in a fucked up manner, and you can't put all of that to his issues with substance abuse, right? On the other hand, when you read interviews with Andy Dick about various topics, but particularly about his work on this episode, he clearly took it really seriously. He respected Robert Picardo as a mentor and learned from him about how to use the technobabble. And there's some really interesting quotes from him in some of these interviews talking about how different it was to work on Star Trek versus news radio, which is kind of the show that made him famous, or the comedy stuff that he was used to doing. He compared Star Trek, he's not the first person to do so, to Shakespeare. You know, it's kind of like a different vibe. There's a certain way you're supposed to act in Star Trek. And by all accounts, from him and from Robert Picardo and from the producers, he showed up to do the work, and he knew it would be challenging for him, and he did it. So that doesn't absolve him of his many outside in real world, peculiarities that have caused some serious pain to people. But in the context of his show, he did a good job. He came to do the work. He took it seriously. And even though he wasn't much of a Star Trek fan coming into it, he was seemed to be very appreciative of the opportunity to be on this show and kind of stretches acting muscles a little bit.
So that got me thinking about who has like nothing to do with Andy Dick in the sense that she's like just seemingly, from what we know, a totally different personality. But it reminded me of you were talking about comedy. And you know how their past is different and stuff. It made me think of Tig Notaro, like in Discovery, how she has a totally different past. And she was saying in an interview with, I think on Conan or something, that she was like
Conan O'Brien,
yeah. Don't call him Conan. I did once, and boy howdy. But anyway, she was basically just saying like she didn't really know that much about Star Trek before it, but she's on it, so she's not going to say she hates it, but she did say she really enjoys it. So.
It's true of a lot of actors too. I mean, a lot of actors came to. I mean, Avery Brooks is like a lot of actors come to Star Trek with very little foreknowledge of it. Others are huge fans, diehard fans, and come to it. So you get a good mix across the shows, and more as the years go on, it becomes harder to not be a Star Trek fan. I'm not going to say that, but there's so many shows, there's so many options. It's been so prevalent in people's lives as they're growing up. So you see somebody like Tawny Newsome, who's the voice of Mariner in Lower Decks, and when you listen to her talk about Star Trek, it's an important part of her life. Growing up, it was an important show. And so her participating in the Star Trek universe has a certain flavor to it. Whereas other people are coming to the show with very little knowledge of Star Trek. And there are benefits to that as well, because they can bring a new flavor to it, some new juices. You want to shake up, you want to squeeze some new juices out from time to time. Otherwise, it'll be the same old thing over and over again. And that's not interesting.
Mm-hmm. Apple juice. Everybody's sick of that shit.
What?
Apple juice is the same old juice all the time. You want to squeeze new juice. That's what he said.
Yeah.
I'm just giving some color.
He's extending the metaphor.
Was that why adults don't drink apple juice? Because they're sick of it?
Yeah, fuck that.
And in most apple juice these days, anyway, here's a if you don't know this terrible secret of the food industry.
Its number one ingredient is vinegar.
No, but apple cider vinegar is very good. No, a lot of apple juice, if it doesn't say 100% juice, for apple juice, if it just says 100% juice, it's 90% grape juice. Because almost all fruit juice is grape juice, and then they add a little bit of the actual thing in there.
So yeah, I noticed during the multi-vector testing, there was exploding consoles, of course, because you have to have exploding consoles in Star Trek. The thing that they just don't think to put a fucking circuit breaker in there. Anyways, whatever.
You can save lives with circuit breakers.
Yeah. Did you notice there was one shot? There was one shot after the exploding console happened that you could slightly see smoke coming up from around the pilots. There was smoke.
Oh yeah.
And it was only there for one shot, and then it camera went away, and it came back.
So really one shot, not even like one scene.
It wasn't a scene. It was just one shot. It went away, and it came back, and the smoke was gone. And it was the same looking smoke that they used for the Neurazine as well,
Maybe they ran out.
So I'm not clear as to why shit started blowing up when they were testing the multi-vector. Were they getting attacked, or was the multi-vector thing not working properly?
They didn't know how to operate the ship is the problem.
And they caused an exploding console. See, if you don't know how to operate it, the console shouldn't...
the warp core was going critical.
Could you imagine if you're using your laptop and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. And it's just blew you across the room.
Or your house is just an alarm starts going off. It's like your house is about to explode.
Yeah. I mean, I understand there's a warp core in there, but you'd think you'd cut it off from the interface. But, that's just me. You think they do it's a smart thing, but that's just me. I'm weird like that. I like to do smart things. It makes me weird. I'm weird like that. I'm weird. I like smart things.
So the
I've always thought that about you.
yeah, me too, Dan. You like smart things.
You're weird. You like smart things.
You guys.
You're weird and you like smart things. And one smart thing that I bet you'll like is there was that quote. There was that whole weird exchange between EMH2 and the Doctor about penises.
Oh yeah, the doctor was going to give him a penis.
The doctor was straight up like, I've even
made some
had
modifications.
sexual relations,
Yeah.
and then Andy Dick is all like, well, that's not even possible because we don't have the proper equipment.
We're not equipped.
And the doctor says basically, he added some code to his code, and Andy Dick says, before you leave, maybe you could download those subroutines into my database. Now I know that they meant that already to be cheeky, as in, I want to download your penis program so that I can have the penis program, and then I can have.
He's
going to
have the same penis. As the Mark.
So
He's
first of
giving
all,
him a copy. It's like if I gave you a copy of my penis. Yeah.
So first of all, that's hilarious on his face. So I already appreciate what.
Do you like my penis? Would you like my penis?
I expect was the intended joke.
Yeah.
But there is that other joke. Partly, I gotta admit, partly because it's Andy Dick saying it. That when he says, maybe you could download those subroutines into my database, that's an invitation for sex.
Yeah, that's.
I think
about
that's
that.
an invitation for sex.
That's even more cheeky. I didn't even think about that.
Right?
He's
Yeah,
a
that's-
cheeky
that
guy,
is.
that Andy Dick Hollow.
Yeah,
he's a cheeky hollow.
I mean, I'm gonna.
And we don't know that it didn't happen because the end of the
Nobody
episode is
knows.
somewhat abrupt because the doctor.
He just comes back.
The doctor comes back and he's like, I spent a long time talking to Starfleet and I explained all the things that happened to us. I explained everything. So there's a huge chunk of time that we do not get to see on screen.
Yeah, Andy
Perhaps
Dick-
explaining stuff to Andy Dick.
Yeah, because Andy Dick, like suddenly the people transport onto the ship, and he's like, "You're finally here," and that's the last we see of Dick. He just goes away. He's just gone after that. I think you're right. I think that's
Maybe
a
he
new
comes back.
phrase that has to be used now. It's like, hey, you want to download those subroutines into my database?
Yeah, I
Might
think
as well say that now.
I would like to coin that as a phrase.
I think you should try
just
saying
did.
that and see what happens.
I'll try that and I'll report back. I'll report back on how successful
See
or
what kinda-
unsuccessful, what the reaction might have been for that. Oh, by the way, those extras at the end who beamed in, they've got Voyager style phaser rifles, but apparently those extras were on the Deep Space Nine payroll. They weren't extras that worked normally for Voyager. And the reason, the supposition, this was on Memory Alpha, and I don't think there's any confirmation of this, but the hypothesis is that the reason those are Deep Space Nine guys is because they were already fitted for the Deep Space Nine style uniforms, because they needed that gray top uniform, because Voyager has not got the new, obviously they've been gone when the new uniforms came in. So I thought that was a pretty good little tidbit, care of memoryalpha.com.
Good work. Speaking of tidbits, 4 years ago, Voyager began its journey 60,000 light years from home. That was 4 years ago.
Well, 70,000 light years originally. I think they have 60,000 left.
Yeah, they had that slipstream.
So
this is left.
yeah, because they've made a few hips and hops and fiddly flops, and so now
Fiddly-flops.
they've got 60,000 left.
well, so the Dick Doctor.
It seems a little closer today, though.
Dick Doctor, yeah, it does. It does. Very touching. A little closer today.
know,
You're not
it was-
alone.
It was kind of sad.
But a Dick Doctor was saying that he was telling the Doctor, he was saying
Doctor.
he was saying, have you ever been turned off, basically, or how long have you been activated? And then
you ever been activated by Dick Doctor?
the Doctor says that ever since the chief medical officer died, he's been active. That's not true. The chief medical the medical officer, he died in the pilot. He hasn't been active the whole time.
You're arguing semantics here. He meant active as in he was the chief medical officer at that point. Yes, he turned himself off.
Yes, Dan.
He went back into his database.
Yes, Dan.
Hey, ain't nothing
There's a
wrong with
difference.
it. Ain't nothing wrong with it. I'm taking the position that is.
So when Andy Dick says,
in the semantic valley.
Andy Dick says, you've been active so long that your hollow chips are falling apart or whatever. He hasn't.
Which is contrary to the whole idea that holograms really stay together.
Yeah,
they maintain their cohesion.
And you're basically saying that the EMH programs go bad after like 4 or 5 years, is what you're saying. You got 4 or 5 years of use, and then their hologram falls apart.
I wouldn't even argue that that's just an EMH thing. I mean, that's just we've all had that. You turn your computer on for so long, eventually, memory starts getting a little goofy and stuff.
Yeah, right.
A reset's good every now and then.
Precisely, but the thing is the Doctor resets all the time because he's always turning himself off. So in one instance, we're saying that...
In at least one instance, he turned himself on.
And we're saying... when he had sex.
Sexual relations.
No, but we're saying in one instance, he was active the whole time, meaning... Even though he was off sometimes, he was the active officer on duty. Yeah. But in the other time we're saying active, we mean the opposite, which is just like, oh no, he's been on the whole time. You see what I'm saying?
Staring into the corner.
You're choosing...
Or the one time that he was sexually active.
You're choosing two different versions of the word active.
I'm choosing to not care that much about that particular exchange.
Okay.
Because I think the point of it was clear. They were antagonizing. They were both antagonizing each other at first, feeling each other out, both being persnickety, as you'd say. And they had to resolve that, and even give the Doctor some exaggeration. He's trying to defend himself against Andy Dick of all people. Yeah. I mean, you can imagine you show up, you're on a ship, you're many thousands of light years from where you're supposed to be, and the person who you rely on helping you is Andy Dick.
Okay, that's fine. One part he goes, "I'm not designed for this kind of duty," and I thought of duty.
Duty.
When Andy Dick goes, he goes, "You don't understand. The Prometheus is an experimental prototype. So am I.
He's being duty.
I haven't even been field tested yet. I'm not designed for this kind of duty." Duty.
I like the.
He was being a
I like
duty.
the character voice you're putting on for this particular.
That was Andy Dick.
Excuse me.
Well, speaking of holograms, the Doctor was kind of the first, sentient hologram. I mean, you can make some other arguments. You can talk about Minuet and other things, but the Doctor is where we really get to spend time with the hologram, get to know them as a character and appreciate them. And now we had Dr. Bashir, I presume. So there was that whole storyline. And then we have the EMH2. But of course, later in Picard and in Discovery Season 3, we get to see all sorts of hologram people.
Most definitely.
So it's fun to see that sort of connection through it. On Captain Rios' ship in Picard, there's a million holograms. And then in
they
Discovery...
all look like him.
Yeah, in Discovery, they had that creepy lie detector hologram fella. Oh, yeah. Who was just sitting in on meetings.
Staring at people.
And being
that was
weird.
Great.
But at the same time, didn't appear to be free in the same way. It didn't seem that there's this whole issue with the sentience of the Doctor, and it's not handled quite the same way as a similar issue with Data. In Data and A Measure of a Man, it's really clear. And the whole point of that episode is to say Data is a sentient, independent being and should be treated as such. The Doctor is treated that way by the Voyager crew, most of them anyway. But holograms are not necessarily afforded as much respect. And we see that in Picard, and we see that in the 31st century, where they don't have as much independence. I mean, we even see here where Janeway, it's funny when B'Elanna runs into the sickbay right at the beginning of the episode and just grabs the Doctor and stuffs him into the mobile emitter and runs off. But Janeway, before they send him, Janeway explains the deal and is like, it could be a risk to your life. And she basically gives him the choice whether to volunteer for the mission or not. And it's kind of interesting because Janeway would not always do that. We've seen Janeway go the opposite way, which is a more standard militaristic way, kind of going back to that, the test that Troy has to take for a command thing, which is the whole idea of, are you willing to order somebody to their potential death, whether it's a for sure death or a potential death? And I sometimes quibble with Janeway's decisions. We had a long conversation about that when we discussed Tuvix, I don't know, a few months back. But in this case, I think Janeway would have been completely justified to say, yeah, you don't have a choice. You got to go, because this is like potentially could save all our lives.
This is the fucking Alpha Quadrant.
This is our whole deal. So this is what you're going to be doing.
Maybe she's learned that the Doctor will just kind of like complain and like be all and stuff, but she knows he'll say yes anyway, so she figures, well, if I make him think it's his choice, his programming won't let him actually say no, so I'll make it easier on my life by pretending it's his choice.
I like the idea. I like that she gave him the option, but I also feel she would have been totally justified in this particular scenario and saying like, no, you gotta go.
No, and I'm saying, and like
it makes it interesting. It makes it an interesting little beat.
Yeah, right. I was just like, I just think that like maybe because it seems like the doctor just bitches and moans and stuff, and he always says yes anyways. So I think she just knew he would say yes. You know, I think she was just like, if I just ask him to do it, he'll complain less later.
He likes to go on adventures, and as we saw in a later episode in season 6. When the Tinker Tenor Dr. Spy, right?
That was the one I was talking about when Torres was giving.
Yeah, where he's actively trying to get more. He wants to be a emergency captain hologram, right? And he's dealing with some of the similar issues there, but he's taken a little bit more seriously. But it's not. There's progress made by that point, but I don't know. It's the whole arc of the Doctor is always interesting. A lot of it is up to the fact that Robert Picardo just inhabits the role so well, and he makes it so fun to watch. And him and Andy Dick, and they're fighting Romulans. It's it all comes together as pretty fun. There's some good action.
Neelix is making
effects.
chili. People are getting
Neelix is
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Everyone's getting like, food poisoning because Neelix wants to be marketable back at home, and then like at one point
that's Earth centric. That's a Marrow centric.
Yeah, it's a marrow centric.
A Marrow centric. I made something.
Oh, marrow. Oh, I was thinking like
not
bone
bone
marrow.
marrow.
I was thinking like bone marrow.
Bone marrow is tasty. I wish he would make some bone marrow.
But there was one part where they were saying where Paris was afraid that the doctor wouldn't make it back because then he'd have to be treating heartburn patients forever. But no, that's not true because if
He'd have to do all that other shit too.
If the doctor didn't make it back, Neelix would presumably stop trying all these adventurous recipes, right? Because if the doctor never made it back,
hopefully everybody would have to be a lot more careful if the doctor didn't make it back.
My point is that Neelix, the reason he was giving everyone food poisoning was because he was trying to make himself marketable on Earth, presuming the doctor would come back and take them home. Now, if the doctor does not come back, they are not going home. Neelix no longer has to make himself marketable at Earth. He can stop with this like super chili.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And then so if anything, Paris, I mean, yeah, he hopes the doctor comes back, but he should take some comfort knowing if the doctor doesn't make it back, he won't have to deal with heartburn for the rest of his life.
Yeah, but he'll have to deal with like all the other medical stuff. Is what I'm saying.
That's true.
You're giving Paris you're putting a lot of responsibility on him to deduce all this stuff. And he's a pilot.
He's a bonehead, that guy.
He's a pilot, not a doctor. He's a pilot, not a philosopher.
What was that whole thing about Grey's Anatomy? There was like downloading. They kept talking about download. It was really weird.
CBS.
Yeah,
and a book by Leonard McCoy as well.
Yeah, because they were saying,
okay. So that threw me off at first, but they weren't talking about the show. They were talking about Grey's Anatomy.
I don't believe the show was on back then.
The show was named after Grey's Anatomy, which is the seminal book on anatomy.
Oh, that's right. My mom had one of those things.
Did you look at it for sexual purposes? Did you open it up?
Well, I think I tried, but all it was drawings of muscles and shit, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's like
but sometimes there would be like a silhouette.
Yeah, there would be
of the body
or a drawing of a penis or something.
The penis or the boobs.
You know, I
floats your boat.
completely forgot about that fucking book. And
but then there's just
Did your mom
intestines and
use
stuff?
it to make voodoo?
Yeah, pretty much.
She was making voodoo.
She was making voodoo. Yeah, so I mean, so Harry, but then they were reading. Yeah, they weren't reading from the show. He was reciting from the book.
From the book Grey's Anatomy.
And so when Harry Kim, like, he hands the doctor Grey's Anatomy, and Paris, he hands Paris Grey's Anatomy to read because he's gonna presumably be bored. And
he's like, you got to be the doctor now.
Yeah, and he's like, I thought you said it was too much data for the Hollow Matrix to handle. And all I could think was, well, maybe because at one point they were like, let's put it all on one file and give it to the doctor. So maybe if he didn't try to put like all of history's like works of writing onto one file to put on the doctor, it's like maybe that would have been less problematic. And also, he wasn't giving Tom Paris the entire works of history. He was just giving him Grey's Anatomy. Yeah. So of course it wouldn't crash. It's just Grey's Anatomy. You're saying that his fucking the doctor would crash if you gave him one book's worth of information?
I don't know if this was the intended interpretation, but I kind of interpreted it as Harry Kim just sort of this was his mechanism for getting Tom Paris off his back, because Paris is like, we got to make a new doctor. And Harry Kim immediately is like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? This is like the most brilliant AI scientist in Starfleet. Took years to develop this. You think I'm going to be able to do this? I can't even get promoted above ensign. You think I can do this in a day? And then Paris is all like, we got to try. And then, so I think Harry Kim just went back to his room and he's like, all right, this will show Paris. And then he purposely put together a demonstration that he was like, see, I can't do this.
Yeah, he sabotaged it. He totally sabotaged it. You know,
it is funny.
On one file.
It is funny that Paris is put in this position, but he's largely put in this position because Paris has spent in previous episodes, in earlier, seasons, Paris has spent some time with the Doctor learning to be basically a nurse, basically to help out, be a medical assistant to the Doctor.
Because for some reason they didn't have any nurses on the crew.
They all died, I guess, in the pilot.
Yeah.
I mean, we know the chief medical officer died.
You'd have to assume, because otherwise you wouldn't need the hollow, because then you would just the nurses would fill in. But
one would
or
expect.
some other, whatever they call the medical staff.
One would expect. All right,
they made a bald. They was fucked up. They commented on his hair, his bald joke.
On whose hair?
They were talking about give him some hair.
Oh yes, Robert Picardo.
And I thought,
the Doctor.
And also I thought it was kind of fucked up of Harry. He made a dumb joke because like Paris was obviously.
Wait. Harry Kim made a dumb joke?
Yeah.
Did it involve a clarinet?
No. Paris was all freaking out because he was in the Doctor's not being a pilot. He's like, take a look around you, Harry. What do you see? And Kim is like, sick bay? And Paris is like, exactly. And Kim is like, so? And Paris is like, so it's not the helm of a starship, is it? And it's very obvious what Paris is saying, but Kim has to be like, did you accidentally inject yourself with some kind of psychotropic agent? Like
they don't even give him a blue uniform. They don't wear that red uniform.
What Paris was saying,
nothing accidental about it.
What Paris was saying wasn't that wild and crazy. He was just saying like, I'm a pilot. I don't want to be in the fucking medical bay.
I think Harry Kim is kind of aggravated with Paris by this point in the series.
He's just giving him shit at this point.
Okay, imagine you're stranded on a ship, so people have to start pairing off as both friends and lovers. And sometimes they might overlap, sometimes they don't.
And that's why Torres and Janeway hate each other, because Chakotay chose Janeway.
Harry Kim was already on that ship, and they pull this guy out of like prison.
That's right. He was in a New Zealand
and he still outranks Harry Kim.
Yeah, that's true.
And then he gets promoted later on.
Yeah.
But I can see if you have, even if it's somebody you're friends with and you're hanging out and you're having a good time, if that's the only person you can see and you're confined to a ship and you have to eat food made by Neelix and Janeway's drinking up all the fucking coffee, so there's not enough coffee, and Chakotay's lumbering around not helping anybody, I can understand if you're going to get mildly aggravated. And because of the scenario, like in a normal scenario, you could get aggravated at your friend, you could have a little argument or a blow up, not see each other for a couple weeks or something. A lot harder to do on a spaceship stranded in the Delta Quadrant.
Yeah, Harry's getting sick of that guy.
All right, any odds and ends?
I wanted to mention that they were talking about doing a complete algorithm extraction from the holograms. Is that basically saying like that's the form of torture that you'd give to a hologram?
It would be like an interrogation, yeah.
Yeah, algorithm extraction. But
or just copying it to to a thumb drive, like a Romulan thumb drive.
Yeah, right.
And that would feel weird to be a hologram
it's an invasive
like in a different file format. Like if you're converted from one file format into like another one, you're like NTFS, and now you're in like Romulan format.
Oh man,
you think it would be uncomfortable
go from
in the database?
NTFS to FAT32.
Yeah, well that's taking a step back.
Yeah,
if you know what I mean.
That's taken. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I think,
mean, well, I think you must be right because like. Yeah, a complete algorithm extraction basically just sounds like they're copying files. But then the Doctor's all like, isn't there some kind of convention regarding the treatment of prisoners? And it's like, he's just copying your files. But like, it's coming out as if it's torturous. So it makes sense that going into a different file system,
I bet you
file system would just fuck them up.
Romulan thumb drives probably have all sorts of like hard angles for the data.
Yeah.
You got to squeeze your bits into all sorts of like weird little jagged.
Some needles.
Yeah.
One thing that they touch on that unfortunately we don't get to hear much about, it's just sort of like a tasty little flavor thing, is where they've captured the Prometheus, the Romulans have, and then the commander gives an order to say, okay, change of plans. We're not going back to Romulus. We're going to go meet up with the Tal Shiar. And he's getting a little resistance from his crew because it's like, what's the deal with it? It was kind of interesting that they added that in there as another little, because they didn't do anything with it. It's a little twist that they add in there, but it's not like it doesn't result in anything particularly plot relevant in terms of his crew doesn't mutiny against him or anything. It's maybe they just wanted to mention the Tal Shiar, but I don't know. They could have just mentioned the Tal Shiar from the beginning to say, well, that's how we found the ship, is because the Tal Shiar learned about it and told us where to find him to go grab it.
Yeah, that was one of the parts that I was noting where Ricard was being like really kind of dickish because he was like, you have your orders, you know, when Navala's like, but dude, like they're expecting us at this other place. He's like, you have your orders. Of
course the other Romulans should know you don't fuck with the Tal Shiar. Like rightly or wrongly, it's like if they're getting involved, you don't want to be messing with that shit.
Yeah, they didn't really make it too clear like what was going on with that.
Not unless you got a bunch of Kawat Malat hanging out on your Kawat Malat.
Kawat Malat.
Kawat Malat.
You don't mess with the Kawat Malat.
Another interesting tidbit is this is certainly, I think, the first, but probably, I think maybe the only overt reference to the Dominion War.
Oh, yeah. They talk about the Dominion War. And the Voyager's like, what the fuck?
There are other sort of tangential references to the Dominion and some other stuff that goes on, but I think this might be the only reference specifically to the Dominion War. I kind of like how they handled it where Andy Dick is like, oh, it's a long story. Go watch Deep Space Nine.
There was a part where, speaking of Dick Doctor and the Doctor, they were like, you know, trying to like work the warp shit or whatever, and then the
warp shit.
The Doctor was like, "There's a little trick." I guess they weren't clear on what was going on, but I think they were in warp and they were trying to stop. And then the Doctor's like, "There's a little trick I saw Mr. Paris do once. If I can generate a slight overload to the nacelle coils, it'll collapse the warp field." And then he does that, and then the ship stops. I don't understand why they had to put that, like, speaking of why did they put certain things in? Why did they put that in there? Why couldn't they just press the stop button? It didn't further the plot.
It was just techno-babble.
All it did was make you think the ship was going to blow up for a second because they went to the back and the ship was like, we're going to blow up. We're going to blow up.
I think it was just demonstrating
just how
they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Running a starship is more complicated than it might seem. And so that's what they were doing here. Because we are so used to on Star Trek of everyone being so capable and competent. And they're always like, oh, bleep, blop, bloop, blop, and fixing everything. Here, these two characters are out of their element, which theoretically adds to the tension and the drama.
And I get that, but it seemed like a pretty competent thing to do for the Doctor to be able to like overload the nacelle coils, but he can't hit the stop button on the warp drive. It just didn't make any sense why he did this complicated ass thing.
I think that's a fair point. That is a bit of an inconsistency in what he's capable of doing versus not capable of doing. Another fun little sort of a tangentially related tidbit is that Andy Dick was one of the people on the William Shatner Comedy Central roast. And
really?
And one of his jokes involved talking about Captain Kirk and Spock having a baby, and that baby's name would be Cock. That's a very Andy Dick style.
Yeah, I can't watch those roasts. They're too like ugh.
They're simultaneously cringy and artificial.
Yeah,
right?
I think like some comics have said, you know, you listen to a podcast and someone will say whatever, but the claim I think is that they used to be more of like an in-house kind of like more funny thing, you know. And then
at the Friars Club in New York, and I think they might have one in LA as well. But the other thing about those roasts is they're supposed to be the famous person getting roasted by their close friends.
Yeah. Not like Donald Trump getting like roasted by what was that dude's name from fucking Jersey Shore? The Situation.
Yes, and by the way, the Donald Trump one is the kind of the perfect example of when they jumped the shark. But I think even before that, when it was like, okay, a famous person, and then other famous people, many which. And in the case of Trump, all of which have no actual relationship or friendship with this person.
Right.
So that it misses and loses some of the stuff. But Andy Dick, I can see that. I can see laughing at that. It's a stupid joke, but I can see laughing at that if I saw that.
Yeah. So, Google.
Snurr.
Are you stalling for time as you think, as you read your notes? All right, I'm jumping in because in the teaser, right at the beginning, when 7 of 9, she says there's a ship, and Janeway's like, what's the deal? And 7 of 9 is like, hey, that's a Starfleet ship in the Alpha Quadrant. Right when 7 of 9 reveals that it's an Alpha Quadrant Starfleet ship, it plays a few notes of the DS9 fanfare. Which was interesting.
Clever.
It wasn't the Star Trek fanfare, like the TNG.
It's like foreshadowing through music.
Yeah. Anyway, that was my bit. That's my last bit. My last contribution.
My basic last one is when Doctor says to Dick Doctor, he goes, well, because Dick Doctor's transferred, he almost like knocked out the fucking Doctor. And Doctor's like, be more careful. If I'm deactivated, the ship will never get back to Starfleet. And Dick Doctor goes like, okay, I'm taking power from life support. We don't need that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what about those fucking knocked out Romulans?
Yeah, I know, right? I thought the same thing. That's fucked up.
He wasn't even like making a joke like, haha, we won't need that. Haha. He was just like, oh, we don't need that.
Yeah, they're gone as far as their usage for the plot is concluded.
Done.
So
yeah, and they were. It was very funny. It's like we never saw them again. There was so much of this and we never saw them again. At the end, it was kind of funny. They were giving each other backhanded compliments because the Doctor was like, Mark II, newborn but filled with courage, and then Mark II was like, Mark I, armed with years of experience. So they were to the very end. Even when they got along and loved each other, they still gave each other backhanded.
And I like that they both had this myth-making routine. Yeah. Both of them have ego routines, really, and that their myth-making is helping support that.
Yeah, I thought it was like almost a buddy comedy or something.
It was fun. It's well deserving of a watch, independently or otherwise. I know many people think it's a classic episode, and I think it qualifies. Partly because it's just fun. The acting is good. The humor, for the most part, is good. A lot of that was Robert Picardo. He said he not improvised, but he fed a lot of those jokes. He did a lot of not rewriting of the script, but he would change the jokes to be more what he thought made sense. For example, he added in that joke about when Andy Dick was all like looming over his shoulder. And the Doctor's like, quit breathing down my neck. And Andy Dick is like, it's just simulated breath. And he's like, yeah, but my neck is simulated too. That was apparently a Robert Picardo original.
Oh, really?
Joke.
That was fun.
That wasn't in the script. So it's a great episode, and I think a good example of the kind of fun that you can have with Voyager, while at the same time still advancing the plot, keeping that whole series arc of trying to get home going. And this is a pivotal moment in that arc, as we mentioned before, that it's referenced, and things that happen in this episode greatly impact what the actions the crew takes moving forward, as well as that Hirogen guy being introduced. It's a very soft introduction, smart move, similar to what they did in Deep Space Nine, introducing the Dominion, where they introduce it a little bit at a time until boom, then you realize there's some shit going down. That's what happens on Voyager, because the Hirogen become like some serious shit that the Voyager people have to, the Voyager crew has to deal with.
And that's what the TNG was doing with the Borg too, but it didn't really work out. It was a little more janky because it began at the end of the season or something.
Yeah,
it was really goofy.
Yeah, with the whole early stuff for TNG with the Borg, they had some plans for it, but because it was writer strikes, there's all sorts of stuff going on that let it slip through the cracks a little bit. But by the time they got to Deep Space Nine and Voyager, they were much better at laying the groundwork a little bit, which was excellent. Puts a lot of faith in the audience that they're going to come back and they're going to keep watching. They're going to be rewarded for seeing these little clues here. For world building in the Star Trek universe, I think it's
world building.
It's an excellent job. All right, so I think that does it for us on this particular episode this week.
That's all it's got on this episode.
This week.
What
week is it?
It's week.
It's this week, baby.
It's a week.
Next week we're doing the animated series.
Yeah, next week we will be doing 2 episodes of the animated series.
Next week,
the Magicks of Megas-tu, the Magicks of Megas-tu. We're gonna have fun talking about that.
Mega-stu. They call me Mega-stu.
So that okay.
Mega Disco Stew.
It's season 1 of TAS, episodes 8 and 9. Episode 8 is the Magicks of Megas-tu, and then the episode 9 is Once Upon a Planet, where we go back to the Shoreleaf planet, and there's some animated adventures there. So we look forward to talking talking at you.
It's good, clean fun.
About those 2 episodes next week. In the meantime,
I'm going to give a clue, a meta clue.
All right, Dan's going to give a clue.
My phone says there's a flash flood watch.
Oh, is that the clue as to what week it is? A local flash flood. We quite legitimately have an international audience. In fact, I was checking. We were like number 15 on the Japanese rankings.
Oh, nice!
In the Japanese podcast rankings for TV review podcasts.
Not even Star Trek, just
number
TV
15?
review.
Yeah, briefly, briefly, but briefly.
Yeah, they got the internet out there.
Yeah, yes, they do. Yes.
So it wasn't even just Star Trek rankings. It was for
that particular one was for TV reviews. TV reviews. But anyway, we have lots
just
of folks
like
around the world.
web scraper.
So just saying that we have a flood watch. And by the way, if we're talking about revealing, these are supposed to be evergreen episodes, but if we're talking about revealing what's going on when we're recording these, I would argue it's somewhat insensitive to talk about our local flood watch when Germany and the Netherlands are being ruined by floods.
Sorry.
No, it's all right.
Sorry.
You weren't to know. But
Floods
now,
here all the time.
I weren't to know.
You weren't. Well, I mean, maybe you were to know, but I'm not going to put that on you. Right? We're just here having some tomfoolery and having some fun.
Mm-hmm.
Right. All right.
It's got tomfoolery.
Yeah, that's been It's Got Star Trek, and we will be talking to you again just about this time next week.
Next week.
Next week for sure. It's definitely the following
It'll
week.
be the next one.
It's totally going to be the next week.
I'm as close to a sentient life form as any hologram could hope to be. I socialize with the crew, fraternize with aliens. I've even had sexual relations.
Sex? How's that possible? We're not equipped.
Let's just say I made an addition to my program.
Before you leave, maybe you could download those subroutines into my database.
We'll see.